Today on the Film Alliance, we are going to talk about some of the lenses that I've purchased over the past couple of years. I've been using it with the ZV-E10 and which one happens to be my favorite. By the way, if you like this new studio setup, don't forget to give this video a like. Today I'm going to talk about lenses and the ones that I own for the ZV-E10. There are so many lenses out there and it could get very overwhelming, so I could see how somebody might just say, you know what? I'm not even going to buy the camera, I'm just going to get a fixed lens. Today I'm going to go over which lenses I purchased, why I use them, and what situations I would use them for. We're going to go over each lens, we're going to test them out, see what they look like on the ZV-E10, and I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking about while I'm shooting some of this stuff. I'll also explain to you my thought process about which lens I'll pull out of my bag when I go out to shoot. I'll be using the ZV-E10, but you could really use any Sony APS-C camera to get similar results. Maybe at the end of this video, you won't buy any of these lenses, but it will at least give you a good head start so you won't be left feeling overwhelmed. To start off, remember that the ZV-E10 and other APS-C cameras have a crop factor, which is 1.5 times the amount of the focal length of your lens. So if you have a 10mm lens on your ZV-E10, really that's the equivalent to about 15mm. If you're interested in learning how to set the Sony ZV-E10 up for filmmaking, I made a free video about that and I'll leave that in the description and also that little box up here. If you stay till the end of class, I'll share with you which one of these lenses are my favorite and which one I always keep attached to the ZV-E10 as it sleeps in my camera bag. For those of you who have specific questions about the ZV-E10 or any of these lenses, I'll be happy to stay after this instruction in the comment section to help answer any questions. I purchased my lenses with some thought behind it. I wanted to make sure that I was covered from my wide angle lens all the way to my zoom lenses and every single focal length in between. The first question I ask myself when I have a video idea is, what do I want my frame to look like? If I want it to be bigger than life, like for a real estate video or a nature landscape video, then I'm gonna go with my wide angle lens because that will make everything look bigger than it is. That's when I'll pull out my Tamron 17-28 f2.8. If I want a closer to life looking picture, then I'll shoot somewhere between 35mm and 50mm, and that's when I would pull out my Tamron 28-75 or my Nifty 50. If I want to do some zoom work where I'm doing like a nature documentary or doing some type of sports and I have to shoot from far away, then I'm going to pull out my Sony 55-210. Now when I zoom this thing all the way into 210 and I add the crop factor, it's really the equivalent of about 315. So I get 315mm out of this camera. Then you add a little bit of active stabilization, now you're in about 340mm zoom. So this is an excellent lens. Now just be careful when you use this lens on the ZV-E10 because you will need to put it on a tripod or a monopod. You won't be able to go handheld. Believe me, I've tried it and I came home to some footage that I thought would be great, but even with active stabilization, it just didn't cut it. On a side note, this 55-210mm lens made by Sony is one of the cheapest lenses that I have found, and it's pretty incredible the picture that comes out of it. So with all that out of the way, now let's get into the meat of the class and what you probably came for. The first lens we're going to talk about is the Tamron 17-28 f2.8. It's a wide angle lens and it puts out such a great picture. Now it's a little bit more on the expensive side. I think it's even the same cost as the actual camera itself, but the picture that it puts out is unbelievable. If I'm ever going out to do landscape video or photography, or I'm doing some real estate shots, then I'm definitely pulling out my 17-28. Here's some shots that I got with the Tamron 17-28 so you guys can have a good idea of what the colors look like inside of the camera. Now that we've got the wide angle lens out of the way and when we would use it, let's talk about the kit lens, which is a Sony 16-50 f3.5 lens. Now this lens gets a lot of hate online, especially with people who know about lenses, and I can see why it definitely feels plasticky, but I personally have gotten some really good shots with this kit lens, and if it's the only lens that you can afford when you pick up the ZV-E10, then I would say just get it and learn this camera with it, because I think it's a great little lens. Here's some test shots that I've gotten with it. To call it a 16-50mm lens on the ZV-E10 is a bit misleading because once you add the crop factor, it really turns it into about 24mm to 75mm. So you can't really use this kit lens for vlogging, especially if you turn active stabilization on, but I would use this lens for any time that I go out kind of run and gun if I'm doing some street photography, recording my family or a party, or just starting out. I got some really good shots with this kit lens, so don't believe all the hatred out there. Go out there and find your frame, know your lighting, and just start shooting with it. If you're a little bit lost on the principles of exposure, I made a video about that for free, and I will also leave that in the description. Now, can you get sharper images out of a Sony Prime or the Tamron or Sigma lenses? Yes, of course you can. But to normal people, they're not gonna notice a big difference. A lot of times I'll use my other lenses on my more expensive cameras, and I'll use this as a C cam, and no one has ever said to me, by the looks of your footage, I can tell you're probably using a kit lens. By the way, the Tamron lenses don't have stabilization, but this one does, so it makes it a little bit more appealing when it comes to trying to pick out your first lens. Not to mention, it comes with the ZV-E10 for a small price, so just pick it up. Now we're gonna pull out the Tamron 28-75 f2.8. Now this one is also a little bit more expensive, but again, you're gonna get some great pictures out of whatever camera you're using it with. It is a full frame lens and it doesn't have stabilization, but I use it on almost 90% of any of the client work I do out in the real world. When you factor in that crop factor, you're really looking at about 42 to 112. But to me, that's okay because it gets you a little bit further. I think that this setup would be perfect for weddings and maybe sports or client work or even headshots. Now you can't really vlog with this lens, it is a little bit heavier and also you're gonna be too close to your face with it. But if you're somebody like me who likes to stay behind the camera, then this is the perfect run and gun setup. Another great thing about this lens is once you upgrade your camera and you stay in the Sony lineup to a full frame, you can just use this lens on your next camera. I use this lens all the time on my A7S III and my A7 III and whatever future cameras I get from Sony that are full frame. Now when it comes to talking head or video interviews, I'm gonna go with my Sony 50mm f1.8. In fact, that's what this video is being made on. Now because it's a prime lens, it's fixed at 50mm and you have to actually move the tripod back and forth on your camera. You can't zoom in at all, but that's okay. It's worth it when you see how sharp your image comes out and also how nice your blurry background looks. So when it comes to video interviews, this is the lens that I'm gonna use. I don't think it has stabilization, but you don't need it because most of the time you're on a tripod when you're using it. Yes, the crop factor means it's actually 75mm, but all that means is you just have to push the camera back a little bit in order to get your frame right. Obviously you can't use this in a small room, but I made an entire video about it and I will leave that video in the description as well. Now let's talk about the Sony 55-210 f4.5. I wouldn't call this my favorite lens, but it's definitely a lens you're gonna wanna get. Some of the shots that I have been getting with this lens are unbelievable. In fact, I think we're gonna turn this channel into a completely nature documentary type channel, because every time it's on the camera, I seem to get some crazy good shots. This is a great lens you can use if you're out at a sports game or you're just into bird photography. Like I said, with active stabilization on and the crop factor, it really is the equivalent of about 340mm, so you get really close to what you're shooting. I made a nature documentary primarily using this lens, and I'll leave that one in the description if you want to see some of those shots that I've gotten with it. So those are the lenses that I have and I use for the ZV-E10. I hope this video was valuable to you. I'm Joe, your life coach and professor, and until the next video, have a nice week. What are you still doing here? Video's over. Oh, you want to know which lens is my favorite lens? Okay. The lens that I would recommend for you to pick up, if you were to pick up any lens at all for your ZV-E10, would be the Tamron 28-75 because of its versatility. You can shoot so much with it. You can punch in close. You can kind of do a wide angle, maybe not too much wide, but you can go pretty wide. I think this lens is the one that you should pick up. That's it. Have a nice week. Peace.